really sorry I wasn't here last year. I apologize. I was in another state. And I mean an actual state, not a state of mind. Last December, Jamie and I took our road show on the road, as you do. We took our stage show called Adam and Jamie Unleashed Behind the Myths Tour. And we took it to 31 cities in 32 days, 36 days. And we've been doing this for 5 years. And it's a show we love to perform. We do it for 2,000 or 3,000 people at a time, and it's really wonderful. We wrote it, we own it, we love it. And I'm up on stage in New Orleans for the opening night, and it's late November. We've just wrapped Mythbusters 2 days before. We've flown to New Orleans. We're doing this show. We get up on stage. We do the whole show, and it's fantastic. It's going really great. The crowd is wild. The food was great. And I get to the closing monologue of the show, and I turn to Jamie, and I'm about to deliver the closing monologue of the show, and I realize it's not in my head. Like, it's totally not there. And I've done enough stage performance to know that 1 second for me, 1 second for the audience feels like about 15 seconds to me. So I know not to start panicking about the time, so I start scrolling through what I remember from this show, because I've remembered it all up until this point, and there's nothing there. All the file cards I have for the end of the show are blank. And so I just started talking. I started talking about how grateful we were to be there, and I said something that tickled in my mind where I was supposed to go in order to tee up Jamie's monologue. And so I did. And Jamie gave me a look of naked panic, because this was not what he was expecting. So I gave him the first line of his monologue, and then we were cool. And then we finished the show. The thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to work from notes here. Actually, I think I'm going to have to take my... You know, there's a thing in the military that you don't talk to people with your sunglasses on, because it's not respectful, and I agree. Hello. A couple weeks ago, I did a really wonderful AMA on Reddit/Maker, and I think some of you were probably on that. We did it in conjunction with the White House Office of Science and Technology and a trip I'd taken to Cleveland, and I got some fantastic questions on Reddit, but one I got 4 separate times really struck me. 4 separate people asked me, do you ever get despondent? Do you ever get discouraged? And how do you deal with that? It is a really common question. And interestingly enough, that question came up during a really, really crappy week I was having in my shop. And when I say crappy, I mean superiorly crappy. I did the AMA on a Wednesday. On a Monday, Norm and Joey and I had started a one-day build in my shop. I was going to build some dials and some stuff for a Apollo suit that I'm working on with Ryan Nagata. And this is precision work. I have recently gotten a Bridgeport mill, and I was doing some milling operations along with the lathe. And it's been a while. And when you're milling stuff, order of operations is everything. And I wasn't getting them right. And everything I built was screwing up. And usually at the very end, on the last operation. And I had to build everything 3 times, and the third one was just barely good enough to send to Ryan to mold and cast for the parts we were making together. And I literally finished the day, I'm not kidding, thinking this thought: I have no business making things. I really, that's how crappy I felt. I came home, I was really blue. And a few days, so then there came this question, sorry, let's see. I felt like that. Tuesday I went into the shop, did mostly the same thing, kind of grinding along, trying to make these really nice parts and not succeeding at it. Then Wednesday morning comes the AMA, and I realized this is a great moment because everybody gets discouraged in the shop, and I can talk about it. It turns out that what got me out of it was really fascinating. I'm working also on a costume for Comic-Con in San Diego in July, and it involves using some materials I have not used before. I'm not going to tell you what materials because it would give away too much about the build, but working with, oh my god, there's a power loader from Alien over there. That's really cool. The view from up here is awesome. I can see everything from my giraffe. the fact is that we all feel it. Every maker in the world feels this despondency, this discouragement. And that's part of the process. The failure doesn't just go away. When I worked at ILM, so most of you know my history. I started working in commercial special effects and in theater in San Francisco in the 90s. I got to Industrial Light and Magic and spent 5 years up there. But there was not a single project I worked on at Industrial Light and Magic. There was not a single build I was doing on Star Wars, on AI, on Space Cowboys, where somewhere within the project I hit a roadblock that was so severe I thought someone was surely going to come tap me on the shoulder and tell me to go home because I had no business being there. Every single project, and this still happens. I always come to talk about making. I came to talk about making today in a wider frame. What is making? It is a term for an old thing. It is a new term for an old thing. And let me be really clear. Making is not simply 3D printing, Arduino, Raspberry Pi, LEDs, robots, laser and vinyl cutters. It's not simply carpentry and welding and sculpting and duct tape and drones. It is also writing and dance and filmmaking and singing and photography and cosplay. Every single time you make something from you that didn't exist in the world, you are making. Yes! Making is important, it's empowering, it is invigorating, but why? There are lots of results that are good that come from making. We improve the world around us. We show people how much we care about them. We solve problems, both personal and we solve societal problems. But these are outside results. They're great. But the secret sauce being embedded here at Maker Faire is that it's good for kids. We all know this, but why? Why is making good for kids? So I made books that were buildings you made out of paper. It was a series called The World at Your Feet by Alan Rose, and you could build all of the international landmarks from the Taj Mahal to the Chrysler Building out of paper. And this wasn't die-cut paper. You had to cut it out with an X-Acto blade and carefully score it and glue it together. It took hours and hours and hours. But it deeply informed my understanding of how planar forms meet. And sometime around the age of, I think, 13 or 14, I grabbed a bunch of cardboard and I made a man that sat in front of my house and freaked my neighbors out for weeks. But in the process of making that man, I just had this idea, I want to make a man. And I started putting it together, and I started taping it together, and I started painting it. And I seriously had this moment where somewhere around 70% of the way into the project, I went to my mom, and I said, I just want to memorialize that at this very moment, I am perfectly happy. And what I was feeling was the empowerment that comes from the fact that I was using my hands to create something that didn't exist before. And yet what I got out of it was different than what I set out to make. This is the thing. Nothing ever goes according to plan. A great general said, no plan survives first contact with implementation. And as a crowd full of makers, you know that you set out to make something, you set out to build something, and what you end up with is never quite exactly what you set out to make. And if it's really good, it's so much better than what you expected. It's smarter than you. It's cooler than you thought you could make something, and it informs you and it teaches you. And as you live with it over the years, it gets better and it gets different because you're different. That's not a bug, that's a feature. That is part of the plan. Nothing ever built is precisely what the builder intended. Diane Arbus said, none of my photos are what I see when I'm taking the picture. They are all either better or worse. Kurt Vonnegut says, travel plans gone astray are nothing but dancing lessons from God. Picasso said, art is not an aesthetic operation, it's a mediator designed as a form of magic to... Art is not an aesthetic operation. It is a form of magic designed as a mediator between this strange, hostile world and us. The world is a cruel place, and we are insignificant. Sorry, kids, it's totally true. Life will be full of strife, hurt, disappointment, and failure. And as a parent And the parents here know this. One of our jobs as a parent is to both protect our children from this knowledge until they can properly process it and deal with it. We have to protect them and prepare them at the same time. Hold on, I got to turn the page. I can't wait to see how this turns out. Making things and being a creator is the ritual by which we experience that in microcosm. Making is how we teach kids to find the path, not to design the path, but to find the path that's happening. We've all gotten to the point in a build where you realize things aren't going the way you thought they would go. You realize a radical new direction is necessary. Again, that's not a bug, that's a feature. It's how we learn. It's how we learn to deal with life. The joke about Carnegie Hall, how do you get to Carnegie Hall, is practice, practice, practice. Failure requires practice too. We have to practice to fail better. Einstein said that success is nothing but failing without lowering your enthusiasm. How does bringing making to kids fit within the educational landscape? I am not an educator. Teachers have a really, really difficult job, and my hat is off to them. I had some amazing ones, and I find the idea of facing a room full of children and keeping them interested terrifying. But when we teach to what we call teaching to the test, when we decry teaching to the test, we mean the rote memorization of facts. And facts are great, but facts without context are just noise. They don't make us better citizens or better stewards of our culture. And we've all had great teachers. Every single person here has probably had a great teacher, someone who showed them something they didn't expect. And I want you to, right now, just a thought experiment, think about that teacher. Remember them. Why do we remember them? Why were they important? What was the secret that they brought to you to show you something? And I submit that what they did was they were able to take the facts of the world and put them in a context for you. They put them in a story for you that made sense of the world at that moment. They turned facts into a story. And we have a system where teachers aren't given the resources or the space or the support to help kids understand the context of facts, we're not educating. And what is it about story? See, this is the thing. I have this long talk I'm writing in my head for years, and I won't get to it for a while yet, but I think storytelling is the origin of everything that is human. I think that our sentience makes us natural storytellers, and that we invented language around the campfire in order to tell better stories. Even if the story is, hey, this arrowhead kills the bigger thing faster so we can eat longer. Everything you make is a story about you. As one of the very limited number of sentient beings in this tiny section of our galaxy, our culture thrives best when we are all contributing our stories. And it has never been a better time to be a maker. We all totally agree with that. Out here with thousands of maker fairs and hundreds of thousands of people being exposed to 3D printing and vinyl cutting and welding and machinist. And I mean, all of this stuff is so beautiful to watch what kids can do. I can't read my writing. This is the part I was working on in the car. Yes, right. So this is also why I think it's never been a better time to be a maker, because the increases in computing power and the economies of scale have turned computers into what cars were to the United States in post-war culture. So post-World War II, you had a whole bunch of people who were solidly in the middle class, well-educated because of the GI Bill. They had some disposable income, and they started realizing that cars weren't black boxes. They were these platforms that you could improve and improvise with and do stuff with. And that is where computers are right now. And we've got like 9-year-old girls making our sentient Arduino robots. That's magnificent. Yes. But, and this is really important, the opportunities for making are not evenly distributed right now. If we're going to progress as a people, as a species, as a culture, we need to heal the things that divide us. I don't think anyone doesn't agree with that. The things that divide us socially, economically, racially. One of the great things about right now being a maker is the Obama administration. They believe strongly in this. There's a first White House to have a Maker Faire in the White House. I'm standing on a giraffe that went to the White House. Amazingly, somehow this thing got frisked by the Secret Service and allowed to enter the White House. How do you frisk a giraffe? Sir, are you comfortable with me touching the inside of your robot leg? On behalf of the White House Office of Science and Technology and the White House Director of Making, Andrew Coy, a few weeks ago I went to Cleveland, which is a city looking powerfully at ways to heal the divides within that city. Again, racially, economically, socially. We went to some of the neighborhoods. Cleveland was the city, one of the cities in the United States hardest hit by the economic downturn. Whole neighborhoods absolutely razed by the housing crash. And we went to boys and girls clubs and saw maker spaces in those, the public libraries. These groups are leading the charge to bring making to every kid. Because when a kid realizes that they can reach out and alter something and make it a little bit better, they've made their sphere a little better. But really, because of what happens in the mental process, they've actually made the world a little bit better. This is my mission. We need to make sure that the threshold for making is as low as possible for absolutely everyone. This is how we empower all the members of the next generation to make the world in their image. Thank you. I have some time, so now I can take some questions from the audience. Who's got a question? Yes, sir. So this is a father of a 10-month-old daughter. He notices that the studies show that in elementary school, there's no difference in the curiosity of girls and boys, but by the middle school and high school, the girls... So there was actually a TED Talk this year by a woman that talked about the fact that by 13 years old, the girls in her coding classes would rather say they hadn't done the assignment than show her 5 failed attempts at coding. That by that age, girls have already been inculcated with a cultural idea of perfection that is not serving them to fail safely, whereas boys somehow seem to be gathering that a little bit longer. Number one, I've gotten asked a lot how to get girls interested in science, and I say ask girls. They're actually more powerful social scientists than all of us put together. They're watching what we do and judging us gently. And it is, again, that's the thing about making is that it's failing safely. The 2 most powerful teachers I had were teachers that told me they didn't know. When I asked a question they didn't know, they said, I don't know. And I remember being thrilled by that. That was fantastic. But not a lot of teachers do that. It's hard to control a class full of people. So again, I'm now rambling because I don't have a distinct answer, but my thinking is, what I've always done with my kids is put what's in front of them that they're interested in. We actually had I've done okay in television over the past decade and a half. And I've been trying to tell my kids that I've given them a terrible example because I've had a successful TV show for their whole childhoods. And that's not reality. That's the fantasy. So I don't shower expensive gifts on my kids. That's by design. They fly coach, and that's where they should be. I've gotten some looks. But this Christmas, they both asked me for expensive gifts, specifically in relation to music. And I was with some friends of mine who are professional musicians in San Diego, and I was saying, should I get these gifts for my kids? And the musicians were like, absolutely! Just do it! Stop talking to us and order them! And they've been the greatest pair of gifts ever, because my 17-year-old twin boys have been making music obsessively since Christmas with these tools that I bought them, and that's really rewarding as a dad. I don't have girls, so I can't speak to that. I can tell you that teenage boys are disgusting. They smell like sweats, Old Spice, and farts. And yet, I'm totally inspired by them. Yes? You have something for me? Oh my God, it's a drawing of me. Wait a second. Ah, that's beautiful. Look at this. Thank you. Do you also like Wallowitz from Big Bang Theory? Because I feel I look a little like Wallowitz in this picture, which is okay. Thank you so much. Yes, sir. How much is it on other children to inspire each other? Well, children are horribly cruel to each other. And, you know, I don't know how to solve the problem of middle school. But, you know, I had a terrible time in middle school. It was awful. I got in fights. I didn't have any friends. I felt at the, you know the hierarchy of your class. I was always towards the bottom with the misfits over here, and it was awful. At the same time, I had some adults around. My parents' friend Jacqueline took me into her clay studio and had me make a pot and told me it was great. Yeah, I still remember that as being really, really powerful. And the reason I learned that my science teachers were willing to say I don't know is because I was hanging out with my science teacher at lunch because I didn't get along with my peers. Here's how long ago it was. He would be in his classroom at lunchtime grading papers, chain smoking in the classroom. This is the first time I ever saw a French inhale. Yes, sir, with the camera. You are throwing a one-day build birthday party for yourself in July. Can I come to your birthday party? I haven't the slightest idea, although I will tell you July gets pretty fat with Comic-Con and finishing up to get ready for San Diego. Please, absolutely, tweet to me about your birthday party. I'm dying to know about it. Young man right here, yes. What's that? Where did I get the jacket from? The giraffe. He just showed up at my house this morning. Hold on, there's a young woman there. Yes. What do I do in the face of failure? Oh, right. I didn't tell the end of that story. Whoops. Look, you know, I can laugh about it now. It sucked. It really sucked. I don't like feeling like I don't know how to build stuff. It feels like I lost my superpower. And that is depressing. I know that it's a mechanism. I know that it's part of the process. I know that I will feel this way. So I simply go back to the shop and I work. Mary Carr, who wrote Liars Club, one of my favorite writers, says that when she's not feeling the writing coming, she sits at her desk and she copies in longhand writing she loves. She says, my fidelity is to write at my desk. It doesn't matter what I'm writing, and it's keeping the wheels greased. And so I went back into my shop the next day, and I made something, and it was kind of okay. And I went back to my shop on Thursday, and again I made something, and it was kind of okay. And then I jumped into this new material. So to give the broadest overview of my costume at Comic-Con, it's a character, and it's one that I drew from scratch. And I have never, I'm a hard-edged model maker. You give me planar forms and I am at home. But you give me a character with a gesture to get, and I'm totally not in familiar territory. And so what I did was I started the final process of making this character come to life in my shop, using materials I wasn't that familiar with, using a process that I'm also not an expert at. And the character started appearing in the thing that I was making. And, you know, for me, part of my mechanism is unfamiliar materials. Like, I love the unfamiliar. So when clearly what I've learned from this is that when I'm working with stuff that I think I know how to do, I set probably unrealistic expectations on myself. Or I also set unrealistic expectations on what I can achieve within a certain period of time. You know, I love Norm and Joey and working with them in my shop, but I also impose a mental pressure on myself to finish by the end of the day. Norm and Joey will tell you that every single time we start a one-day build, I'm like, this should take like 2 or 3 hours. And like 7 hours later, we're grinding away at it. Yes. Are there any myths from Mythbusters we haven't tested? Oh, yeah. Tons. In fact, I can't stop gathering them. I still have this mechanism when I come across a news story that is testable. I just put it in my Evernote document of untried myths. Someone came up to me at an event a couple of weeks ago and they said, hey, here's one I grew up with. It's not possible to make mayonnaise in a lightning storm. And I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm only just hearing about this now. That is an amazing episode. We begin with Van de Graaff generators. We talk about emulsification. We start examining it on the micro and macro level. We move on to Tesla coils, and then we got to fly to Florida to go to Lightning Alley where we shoot rockets in the sky, have lightning bolts hit our experimental space while we're trying to make mayonnaise all day long. I want to shoot that episode, but alas, that is my old job. Yes, back there. What is my go-to foul language? You don't want to know. No. I curse like a sailor. This is why we tried several times within Mythbusters to film a story meeting, but we can't. We couldn't, specifically because of me. And the thing is that it's one of the way, as someone who is a bit of a social outcast, there's still a part of me that shocks myself when I say something particularly dirty or weird or gross. I'm always like, So part of my tension release is to say the filthiest, worst possible thing I can think at any given moment. And my crew knows this, but it's not for publication. This is like Jamie, there were lots of times when I think probably 3 or 4 times over the course of shooting Mythbusters that Jamie would pull me into his office and go, you know, if any of the things that accidentally got recorded make it out, it could be the end of your career. I'm just letting you know. I'm like, I'm cool. I feel okay in the hands of Beyond Productions. Okay, I've been ignoring over here. Who's got a question over here? Yes, young man. Besides music, what else do my kids make? That's a great question. You know, they're 17, so they're just really starting to come into their own. One is a very accomplished singer. He's at Oakland School for the Arts. The other has been obsessively playing the guitar and writing songs. You know, they both went to School of Rock, which actually in San Francisco is the San Francisco Rock Project. It's a nonprofit, and it's an amazing place for anybody remotely interested in music because your kids will get inculcated with some fantastic 70s funk and good rock and roll. I come downstairs and my son's like, hey, do you know this guy Billy Joel? That is awesome. And, you know, they're 17, so they're going to be out of my house in what will feel like a minute. So I feel duty-bound to introduce them to all the tools in my shop, one at a time. So we're slowly moving toward, we've moved from carpentry. Hopefully in the summer we're going to move to some of the machine tools. You know, I'm not sure what they're interested in making. They both have some facility with being able to visualize stuff, and that thrills me because show me someone who can visualize something in their head and I can teach them anything. Yes, sir. What book have I gifted to other people the most and why? Wow. That is a really good question. Twice at Christmas, this is a weird pair of books. Twice at Christmas, I bought like 30 of the same book and gave it to everyone. 2 years ago, it was Kevin Kelly's Cool Tools. Because really, you can search the internet, but there's nothing like flipping through a catalog, through Small Parts catalog, or Micromark, or the Grizzly catalog. And Kevin Kelly's Cool Tools is like that on steroids, with actual real-world descriptions from people about what they're building. The other one I gave was, I think about 6 years ago, they released a beautiful hardbound edition of E.B. White's, Strunk & White's The Elements of Style. I gave that to everyone for Christmas. I love writing. It's a grind and it's really difficult, but when it comes well, I'm really happy about it. And Strunk & White's The Element of Style is a masterpiece, and everyone should read it, even if I violate its dictum all the time by using the word wonderful. They actually say, don't use wonderful. It's a really boring word. Yes. Yes, sir. What is next for me? That is a great question. I'm wondering the same thing. It is, I have a lot of plates spinning. I'm pitching other shows. I've jumped it with both feet into Tested. We've been doing a ton more one-day builds. Ton more travel is coming up. That's really exciting. Really exciting. So Tested is a key part of the future. Tested in all of its adjuncts and ancillary ideas. Like, we're going to push it to be much wider. Working with the White House Office of Science and Technology to figure out ways to lower the threshold to making for everyone. If I have any bit of a platform that lasts for any time, I want to just keep on helping people understand that that's really important. Absolutely. And then, spending time in my shop. There's just nothing better than farting around in your shop trying to, making something better for your kitchen. So it's a combination of all of those things. Yes, sir. Have I ever tried making a tauntaun from Star Wars for myself? That is a really cool question, because the fact that I didn't end up with the tauntaun that I built for the Mythbusters episode made me very sad. But it's not. It's basically because by the time I got back to it after we'd finished filming that episode, it was like halfway rotting. Yeah, it stunk really bad, and it was all dyed blue from the crap we'd put on it. And there was just no. I think I brought it into my shop and realized it was so huge. It was going to block anybody from being able to see the giant Tyrannosaurus Rex skull I have in my shop, and that just will not do. I love you. That's a great question. How do you keep inspired when people are denigrating your work? Oh, sweetie. Wait a second. Come here. Amazing. That's an amazing question, and I really appreciate it. And you're brave as hell for asking it in front of everybody. You find your communities. You find your Sangha. You find your people. I may only be one, and it may be your mom. That was mine for a while. You find that one person that appreciates what you do and tells you that it's good, and listen to them. Anybody that tells you that your work is, that's denigrating your work or denigrating the effort you're putting into it, is an asshole. Sometimes. Sometimes when I'm driving, everyone's an asshole. Remember, children, it's cool when adults curse. It's gross to hear curses come out of children's mouths. So just curse among your friends. This is another reason it's never been a better time to be a maker, is because of the internet, because the groups of people who will encourage you are out there. And I love, so the group I spend the most time on online is the Replica Prop Forum. But what I love about the Replica Prop Forum is you'll have one person posting pictures of a full-sized robotic build from the original Judge Dredd, and it's amazing and it's perfect and the weathering is so good. I'm a little embarrassed by posting pictures of my work. And then you'll have someone who makes an Iron Man costume out of paper and fiberglass, and it's rough around the edges, but the dedication is so pure that he's also, or she is also, getting encouragement from everyone on the forum. That it balances across, and that effort is really what matters, the effort and the passion. And if you're around people who don't recognize that the effort and the passion are worth something, stay away from those people. And look, also, I recognize when I say that I have certain privileges as a kid that I don't even know about, but I had the ability to quit jobs that were run by people who were stupid. And I had that ability because my parents agreed with me that that was not a good way to spend my time, and they paid my rent when I wanted to quit those jobs. That was great. Not everyone has that opportunity. And so it's not always easy to extricate yourself from people who are trying to bring you down. Again, if you can find that one person, even if it's a virtual person online that you haven't met, some of my best friends are people I haven't ever met in person, and let them support you and support them too. And that's another one, is when I'm not feeling enough support in my life, I realize Actually, this is really true. There are times in my life I feel like I'm not getting enough support. Almost always what that means is I'm not supporting the people around me enough. That's the trick. And I go back towards the Buddhist ideal of service, to serve the people around me. What can I do for their lives? What can I do to make their lives better? I'm going to take another question. Yes. Hey, it's you. Hey, how you doing? How do I go prioritizing my builds? I prioritize my builds based on enthusiasm, which again is a great luxury I have. We started visiting shops on Tested, and we visited Ryan Nagata's beautiful shop in LA, and then Frank Ippolito's. But one of the places I want to go is I want to visit someone's tiny bedroom desk shop that has like 6 tools, because you can do amazing things out of the smallest places. Rene Magritte, one of my favorite painters in the world, spent his whole life painting in the corner of a Paris apartment. He didn't have a studio. He painted one painting at a time. And when you have a big space and you can store a lot, it makes it really easy to let projects fester for months and years, which is my process. I am a high-functioning hoarder. But I also recognize that my enthusiasm for the things that I do is the engine of everything that I have. I have somehow managed to carve out a life where my enthusiasm will lead to those things. And so if I'm grinding on something and it's not working, I turn to something that will work, and I work on that for a while, and then I go back to the other thing. So having multiple projects, actually building the Lego Sisyphus a few weeks ago was really invigorating and made me want to bring more Legos in, because Lego's just this it's so much fun. It feels like I'm 6 again. My favorite myth that I busted, I can't possibly have a favorite, because you never point to your children and say which one's your favorite. It would be bad form. But actually, like my children, there is a every single one of them was a different point in my life. I have fond memories of even the really difficult times. So there are multiple classes of things that were great. There are stories I think were really great, like Bullets Fired Up and Lead Balloon, that I think are elegant television that no one ever had done before. There are things that were really fun to do, like drive an Indy car on the Indy 500 track and not pop the clutch even once. Then there's things like hand feeding an octopus that fell in love with me and left hickeys all the way up to my shoulder. My wife was like, "What is that?" And then there's things like flying in the back of an F-18 Hornet or flying in the U-2 spy plane to above 70,000 feet. That's what I am legally allowed to say. My highest altitude is classified, but I could see like 400 miles of Californian coast in one glance below me. It was astounding. Mythbusters inexorably changed me. The myth that it busted for me is that you need a science degree to be a scientist. I am now a scientist because of Mythbusters, and I don't even qualify that anymore. We did a shoot at the Academy of Sciences, the Steinhardt Aquarium in San Francisco, and their head biologist, Rich Ross, does not have a degree in biology. He is just one of the world's experts in raising cephalopods in captivity, and there he is with the job of head biologist at the Steinhardt. That is the most inspirational thing I've ever imagined. Yes, sir. The best explosion, it's water heaters, hands down. Dude, the thing is that all explosions happen so fast, you don't really get a chance to experiencing them. So it's literally like a crack, and then it's gone. There's a shock wave, and you run towards the high-speed camera to see what happened. Also, there's a distinct difference between what you see and what you hear, because you want to be far enough away not to die. So the explosion happens in silence, because the speed of light is so much faster than the speed of sound, and then the sound hits you along with the shock wave. Wow, this whole thing moved. But water heaters, you're close enough, because we could be inside a double-ended 20-foot container bunker, and the explosion itself is really slow comparatively. So it sounds like it's the water heater when it detonates sounds exactly like the Wile E. Coyote in your head wants it to feel like. It's this long, lugubrious thud, and you feel it in the ground and then in your chest. I have often said it feels exactly like falling in love. But your results may vary. Yes, sir. What is the first thing I ever hacked, built, or repaired? Oh my God, that's great. I remember. I think I was 8 years old, and my parents bought me a personal tape recorder, like a tape cassette recorder, and I was using it to make little radio plays. So one of the tricks I did was I would record half of a conversation, and then I would take the tape, rewind it, and go down to my parents, and I would have a conversation with my tape recorder. Like I'd record, "Fine, you?" And then I'd go down and say, "How are you?" And the tape recorder would say, "Fine, you?" Then I recorded a James Bond kind of drama. And the drama consisted of me wandering from room to room going, "Wait, who are you? Ooh, ow, ooh, ah, ooh. Oh, whew, wow, I beat that guy up. Wait, who are you?" And did that for hours. And then I was running upstairs with the tape recorder with the cord coming out of it, and the cord got caught behind a door. So as I was running up, the tape recorder zipped out of my hands and fell down the stairs. And my sister Kate's boyfriend, Phil, knew the magic of taking screws out of the back and taking a look inside, and he found the belt that had come off the main drive wheel, and he put it back on, and I watched that happen, and I was 10 times smarter at that very moment. Let's see. Yes, sir. The most memorable injury. I think I'm still not able to talk about that one. Wait a minute. I'm just thinking about that. No, I shouldn't. Ask Jamie. We were very lucky on Mythbusters to have very few even medium-sized injuries. The most common injury we had over the 14 years was broken fingers. 6 broken fingers, all from the same reason, moving safety equipment. Our blast shields weighed about 150 pounds apiece, and as you move them around, you have to move them like an Egyptian, like use their own mass to kind of walk them around. And if your finger gets between those and something else that's hard, your finger loses. I was the last one to break a finger, and I did it about 2 years ago. And it ruined this one thing for me, which is up until I broke that finger, I had only ever broken one bone in my body, which was my neck. When I was 18, I was pulling a huck fin off of a rock jetty in the Hudson River by a lighthouse, seriously, and I dove off the rock into the water, and there was a rock right under the water, and I hit it head first. Yeah, no, I'm the luckiest guy alive because I was diving, my spine was straight, so I compressed it and chipped a small pinky knuckle-sized chunk out of my 7th vertebrae, and I had no residual damage from that. But I got to tell that story for years. Like, I've only ever broken one bone, right there. Now I've broken 2, and the other one's my finger. It's not a good story anymore. Yes, sir. Why did I join Mythbusters? Because they were offering me money to be on television. It was an easy one. Actually, yeah, Jamie called me up. Jamie called me up in the spring of 2002. We were professional colleagues, and he said, "I got this call from Discovery. They want to make this show called Mythbusters." I hear a kazoo. It's great. And we shot a demo reel. He happened to have called me at the very moment in time I had bought a laptop, the Pismo, specifically built for editing digital video. And I had been teaching myself filmmaking on this when he called. He didn't know this. So I went in, we shot for 2 hours. I cut a 14-minute demo reel out of that. It took me about 10 hours to do it. We sent it to Discovery. They loved it. They showed up 2 weeks later. And I'm not exaggerating. We did not stop filming Mythbusters until last November. 14 solid years. Yeah, it was a freight train. Yes, in the blue. What progression of jobs did I take before I got to ILM? My first job was as a paperboy. Then I was a page in the library filing books that got returned. Then I worked for the local public access station in Tarrytown, New York. I specifically worked on a video program called This World of Mime. Yeah. Then I got a job in New York. My first adult job was working as a projectionist at the 8th Street Playhouse, where the Rocky Horror Picture Show fad began. The 8th Street, along with the Waverly Theater, was also the birthplace of the American midnight film. I went from that to work in graphic design. Graphic design led to assistant animation, which then I moved out to San Francisco in the early 90s. San Francisco in the early 90s was the greatest theater town ever. And I cut my teeth at Project Artaud and Berkeley Repertory Theater and Theater Rhinoceros and Eureka Theater as master carpenter, rigger, set builder, painter, etc. And that got the attention of Jamie Heineman, who gave me my first job in commercial special effects. Then I went to a toy company where I discovered that I didn't like being management. So because I was working for a toy company, I was like, I'm going to spend an hour every day building with this toy because that's what we make and building is what I do. And then when that petered out, I got to ILM. Yes, the scariest thing I've ever done, aside from having children. And I don't mean that children are scary. I mean, it's terrifying when you're a expecting parent to think about all the ways you're going to screw them up. It was doing the underwater car. So I recognize that I've spent a lot of my life replicating people's totally worst phobias, from being on stage and not knowing what to say to being in a car that's sinking underwater. But yeah, the second time we did underwater car, we tipped it upside down to see if that was more disorienting, and it totally was. But worse than that is we had cleaned the car out of all of its fluids so that we didn't contaminate the water we were in, and we had vacuumed out the car. We had vacuumed out like 300 cigarette butts. But that meant that we didn't realize that we weren't removing any of the tar and nicotine from the upholstery. So when the car filled with water and I opened my eyes, it felt like I'd poured salsa into my eyes because the tar and nicotine was burning me. And so I had to close my eyes again and wait for the pain to pass. And now I realize I don't know where I am in the car. Like, the disorientation is total. I'm not even sure if the car is right side up or upside down. And I reached over to my left where I think my safety diver, Don Best, was, and I was right. He was there, and he had an octopus with, that's what the second air source on a scuba diver's vest is, and he handed me the octopus, and I grabbed it and put it in my mouth and took this big fat breath. But the octopus was upside down. And if you're a scuba diver, that means I got a lot of water in that breath. And there's a reason waterboarding is torture. It's really serious. I've never felt anything more terrifying than inhaling a few teaspoons of water underwater. And my whole body went tense. And I remember thinking, this really sucks. And then I thought, calm people live, tense people die. And I didn't feel calm, but I forced myself to relax my muscle groups one at a time. And while I was doing that, I thought through my training, the safety training from scuba diving, which is pull the regulator out, which you totally don't want to do when you're feeling tense underwater. Pull it out, turn it around, put it back in, purge it, and everything was fine. I managed to survive that without any incident because I didn't panic. That's too close for me. I am not an adrenaline junkie, despite the best evidence to the contrary. Yes, sir. YouTube channels. I'm terrible. I kind of find them as they come. I'm subscribing to one right now, and it's this amazing guy who I'm sure many of you know of, Matthias Wendell, who builds everything out of plywood. I love that guy. I particularly love... Okay, so when you watch, as you all know, when you watch build videos online, no one seems to have discovered the concept of editing. So I see lots of people waiting for hot glue to set in real time. Whew, yeah. But Matthias does this thing where he's often using a mallet to set things. It'll take like 100 taps. And what he does is he edits in real time until he starts hammering, and then he goes, brr, 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 and I can't get enough of that. I think it's so funny. I love that bit. that's the main one I'm subscribing to right now. I've also spent a lot of time watching Tony Swatton make stuff on Man at Arms, and what's his name? Richard Lyon, the sword master at Weta Workshop, making his swords. I love watching people forge things like suits of armor and stuff. This is the great unrealized thing. I have a whole bunch of metal forging and sheet metal tools that I have not yet assembled in my shop because someday I want to use them to make a suit of armor. Yes, sir. My greatest failure. Well, it was actually the subject of my Maker Faire talk about 5 years ago. I talked about screwing up a friend of mine's student film so massively that I lost that friend. Yeah, no, and I lost a really close friend because they felt that I sabotaged them with my inattention and my inexperience. And it is one of the key places I learned that I need to ask for help when I feel out of my depth, and I need to be able to recognize that I'm out of my depth. I was really arrogant at that point. And I didn't realize that it was arrogance that was taking me to that, but I was like, oh, this is going to go great. I'm going to be awesome. And I will tell you, every single time I've ever had those two thoughts, life has bitch slapped me back into sense. Sorry for cursing again. Yes, sir. What costume I'm building next? I'm not going to tell you. It's a secret. It's so cool. You're going to see it at Comic-Con this year. What if you're going to? We'll cover it on tested.com. Tested.com. Let's see. Yes. Any advice? So you've dropped out of school. You're an engineering student and an artist. Awesome. That's right in my wheelhouse. And most making spaces are geared towards kids. Is that your thing? Right. Except that I can tell from your carriage that you are comfortable speaking, and you strike me as a natural communicator simply because you're clearly not nervous and asking a question in front of all these people. You might consider, again, like I get so much out of teaching somebody else a thing. I learned so much about it. I taught at the Academy of Art for 5 semesters in their model making department, and I found it really invigorating. I'm not saying go out and get a job teaching, but you could go to a maker space or a hacker space and start like showing kids how to use the stuff. And again, the other thing about the threshold to making being almost zero, corrugated cardboard is the gateway drug to everything. If you want a suggestion for what to make out of corrugated cardboard, do a Google search for suit of armor cardboard. It is such you are going to be like, oh, samurai armor, Roman segmented armor, full European battle harnesses, everything. People have made it out of cardboard, and they put up their patterns online. It's really beautiful. The armor has been in every culture since time immemorial, and corrugated cardboard is everywhere because Amazon ships SD cards in giant empty boxes. Yes, young lady. The hardest I've ever laughed on Mythbusters. Wait a minute. No, that's not repeatable. No, that's not repeatable. Wait a minute. It was, God, it was when I first came up with the phrase, failure is always an option. And then that led to the phrase, I can't see any reason why this shouldn't work. Which is, Jamie and I had an entire day where we kept on doing that. And I think it was the Syrian water torpedo, those things, right? So that was an awful day. That was so rough. We're trying to make these things work, and they're not working, and they're taking off in ways that are absolutely terrifying, so we're changing our bunker strategy to not get killed. And every time we did it, Jamie kept on going, look, I've thought through the whole thing, and I can't see any reason this shouldn't work. And then it would fail spectacularly. And I was doing the same thing, so by the end of the day, it just became this mantra for hubris. Like, I can't see any reason this shouldn't work means it's probably going to fail immediately. Yes, sir. Why was Mythbusters put off the air? Again, decisions made far above my pay grade. No, that's not exactly true. every show has its arc. That arc looks very much like a bell curve. And Mythbusters reached the other side of its bell curve at almost the exact moment that Jamie and my contract came up. And it worked out really well that way. The best part about ending it was that Discovery allowed us to end it on the terms that we wanted to with the fans and call it the last season. In reality or structured reality television, this almost never happens. They usually just stop making the shows. So the idea that Discovery allowed us to call the whole thing the last season and really celebrate what we'd done and bring the fans into the episode and talk about it, I'm forever grateful to them for that. Thank you. Yes, sir. What is the funniest thing I've come home and said to my wife, hey, honey, guess what I did today? You know, the thing is that when you spend every day doing the weirdest stuff imaginable, it ends up actually becoming almost aggressive to come home every day and be like, here's how cool my day was. And it took me a while to sort of get that. I am somebody who will naturally suck up the oxygen in a room by telling stories. And you can imagine that being married to that can be exhausting after a while. So I started paying a lot of attention to, on my way home from a big shoot, just thinking about my house. Remember what I said earlier about service and servicing the people around you? Just thinking about, instead of, I can't wait to talk about my day, just thinking about, what's it like in my house right now? How are my kids? How is my wife? How are things going there? What are we going to make for dinner? And then if there was something that was particularly moving, something that was really poignant, or something that I learned, my partner totally wants to hear about that. But not the bragging of, I got to fly in a jet, man. It was awesome. Let's high five me right now. That being said, it was very, very funny to come home with the octopus hickeys up to my shoulder and taking off my shirt at the end of the night and my wife going, what the hell is that? Yes, sir. Do I make anything to actually help me cook or in my home life? Yes, absolutely. I made the separators for the drawers in my kitchen that hold my pots. It's on my list to make a thing that catches the coffee grinds out of my coffee grinder. Perhaps my most important inspirational maker is the sculptor Alexander Calder. Alexander Calder, who turns out, I just heard this last night, went to Lowell High School in San Francisco. Yeah, along with our Supreme Court Justice Breyer. That would be bad to get that wrong. Alexander Calder is the inventor of the mobile. And he made mobiles and non-movable mobiles he called stabiles, which I think is hilarious. But he also got his start in Paris in the 1920s with a thing called circus. And circus was a suitcase of little tiny circus performers and animals and sword swallowers and trapeze artists, all made out of coat hanger wire. And he and his wife would take this to parties and they would perform circus. And for all of my childhood, circus and the suitcase it was in was the front piece at the Whitney Museum of Art in New York City. So I saw it repeatedly and it really inspired me. And then about, which would be 1988, the Frick in New York had a show of just the stuff Calder had built for his house. Like a toilet paper roller that was like a duck that walked when you pulled toilet paper. He built a toaster that burned one of his daughter's names in one side of the toast and the other daughter's name in the other side of the toast. I love that stuff. I built our doorbell. There's a great restaurant in London called Bar Ricard. I don't know why it says bar twice. But at every table at Bar Ricard, there's a brass button that says press for champagne. And when you press it, somebody shows up at your table in 30 seconds with a bottle of champagne. So we had that on our house for the longest time, a brass button that said press for champagne. Yes. Yes, I am personally thinking about building a Gundam model. I also then, in the research about the Gundam model, saw that Bandai has been making some Star Wars ships. I just put 6 of those in my Amazon cart last night. And I think I've already gotten one, and Norm's got a couple for me to build. So definitely there will be some Gundam building on tested very, very soon. All right. Yes, ma'am. The worst thing that ever happened while filming Mythbusters had to be losing track of a cannonball. I am forever sorry to Dublin, Pleasanton, California for releasing a cannonball into their midst. Don't woohoo. No, I'm serious. This is the worst possible imaginable thing. This cannonball skipped over a water barrel, bounced off a rock-hard hill that was supposed to be made of clay, but because of the drought was basically a rock, flew 2,500 feet through the air into a neighborhood. It bounced off the sidewalk in front of this man's house and went up through his house. It entered his front door at the lintel and then went up through his living room, up through the ground of his bedroom, and left above the window of his bedroom, and his wife and his child were sleeping 5 feet away. This is, without a doubt, the worst thing that we could ever imagine, and we're so grateful that no one was hurt. That cannonball then flew another 1,000 feet before landing on someone's roof, bouncing twice, and through the passenger window of an SUV that had been parked 5 minutes before. We fixed both houses and the SUV, and we changed our safety procedures forever after that. That was absolutely terrifying. Yes, sir. Star Wars or Star Trek? Apples and oranges. Apples and oranges. Star Trek is the utopian social commentary. Star Wars is the visceral, aesthetic hero's journey. They both are necessary. They both are culturally vital. Star Wars. I'm such a jerk. I just hosted a thing for Paramount like 2 nights ago in LA for the new Star Trek film, which looks amazing, by the way. I think Justin Lin's done an incredible job. The film's going to be amazing. Star Wars was like my first cultural memory. It really was. Let's see, way in the back there. Yes, blonde. Advice for people who are just getting started with 3D printing. That is a great question, because 3D printing is still really rough around the edges right now. I know. You know, the thing is that there's tons of support groups out there. You find those and put your questions in. The key, I love the fact that you can now search for the actual language of your question and then add forum, and you'll find somebody who's discussing it. What's that? Rep rap? Rep rap group. Rep rap group. Find the guy with the biggest beard and all the steampunk stuff on his head, and he will tell you. How you doing? One more question. Oh gosh, it better be a good one. Yes, sir. What frustrates me? What gives me hope? Let's see. So there's no shortage of forums online where you'll find people claiming that Jamie and I are idiots and have no idea what we're doing and saying Mythbusters is a dumb show. I refer to these people as grad students. I've wanted to make that joke for a while. The people that jump to our defense are often the top-level scientists at NASA and LANL and JPL. There's nothing more exhausting than arguing with someone who is sure that they're right. The thing that Jamie and I had that made the partnership so fruitful was not that we liked each other, because we really don't. And it's not because we get along, because we really don't. But the fact is that while Jamie and I disagreed about all the little things all day long, we're both pretty sensitive to the fact that when the right idea shows up in the room, it's really obvious. And I'm sure you've had this experience. You go back and forth, chewing gum, epoxy, rubber bands, and then someone says, just use a tongue depressor. And you're like, oh, wow, I can't believe we're all so stupid. Let's do that. The fidelity that Jamie and I had was when the right idea shows up in the room, you give up everything you've been fighting for and you just do that. And many of our best builds, we couldn't tell you which one of us came up with the solution because it was so organic. The fact is that when you know you're right is often when you are the most wrong. And like I said, as soon as you think, oh, I got this wired, life is really about to remind you that you are an insignificant speck of carbon. Thank you guys so much. I love you, Maker Faire. Stay making. Stay curious.